G'day listeners and welcome back to the first Keeper League podcast episode for 2021. We're the AFL Fantasy podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars. We only talk about the lesser knowns and those that are going to bring value to your draft Keeper Leagues. My name's Hef and I'm joined by my co-host Keays. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. It's been a bit of a short off-season, really. I know we've done a few position changes, podcasts and things like that, but this is our first main one and it seems like there hasn't been much of a turnaround since we just did our last one last season.
No, it's the off-season gone quickly, but that's not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. It means that footy is just around the corner, which is awesome.
Absolutely. Not far away now. I think only 7 or 8 weeks until we're there, so very, very close. So yeah, just for those who are new to the pod or I guess listening, tuning back in for this year, we're now streaming all of our podcasts live on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch and YouTube, so you can get around those and join in the conversation there and watch us talk shit live, so it should be very interesting for you people out there.
See the magic happen live. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so yeah, since we last spoke, fair bits happened, I guess. I was on the Traders podcast, and the
Hollywood Hef is what the people are calling you around the parts. I've had a lot of feedback from that. They've said, a lot of the listeners have asked if I can just keep you in check, now that you're a big star, Yep. I'd potentially say probably one of the two most influential people in fantasy football now. Is that true?
I thought you were going to say in the world.
No, definitely not. Like there's Kanye West and stuff like that. I think you're a few levels down from Kanye.
If there was a Forbes like 30 under 30, even though I'm over 30, that type of thing.
Still wouldn't make it. No. I was going to say in fantasy football, I think you and Warney are just really the two big dogs of the fantasy world. So it's my job to keep you in check.
I don't know about that. That's a pretty big call. I think you're disrespecting a few people that have been in the game a lot longer than I have. But anyway, the reason why I was on there is because Keeper Leagues are now in AFL Fantasy on the official AFL Fantasy website. So our stocks are definitely going up. But I guess for those out there who enjoy playing in Keeper Leagues as well, there's a new platform for us to have a look at. And there's not a lot of information about it right now. There's the rules and stuff like that. The settings aren't out yet. But to my understanding, it's going to be very similar to Ultimate Footy. There might be one or two things that you can't do yet, I say. But I reckon give it time and it's going to be a pretty handy platform. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for that. But anyway, before we get stuck in, Kays, we better announce that we've got a new shipment of Remedy Kombucha coming in. So we've just actually got a new cherry plum. It's not new, it's been around for a while, but last year all the listeners were tweeting us about cherry plum and we never tried it. So we reached out to Remedy and they sent us a shipment. Got 15 cases of Remedy Kombucha sitting behind me. The Great Wall of Remedy, we call it.
Are you ready for the secret sound, Hef?
Yeah, let's do it. I might open mine as well.
Oh yeah.
Give it a taste test, guys.
Cases. First ever time trying cherry plum. No doubt Hef's had about a case already. He's actually addicted to it.
I did have one last night.
Quite nice. Yeah, see, I knew.
Yeah, I was live streaming.
This is the problem when Hef keeps the kombucha at his house. All of a sudden, I rock up one week and there's 15 cases. Next week I come back, there's one. So
that's an absolute lie, Kays.
But you're healthier than you've ever been before, Hef, I have to say.
All right, let's get stuck in. So do you want to explain the concept tonight, Kays?
Yes, so tonight we are discussing 3 teams. So over the next 6 weeks, we'll talk, 3 teams a night. So this week we are starting off with the Crows, Brisbane and Carlton. We won't talk about the rookies in this pod. We've discussed that at length previously. So it's all about players who have been on the list, one or more years. So we'll go into those people who are potentially a bit untapped. And I suppose another thing to explain is when we talk about drafting in this particular pod, we're talking as if you're in an established keeper league. So not one that is, a startup league or a brand new draft league for a one-off year.
So when we say like draft Oscar Mccinerney early, you don't mean like in the first few rounds of your startup keeper draft. You mean in your redrafts for this year. That sort of stuff.
You've kind of kept 10 or 15 kind of players. That's the kind of pool you're jumping into. So probably, players from, regulation 1, picks 150 onwards kind of thing, or top 200, that kind of thing. We're excluding them. We're talking about the keeper league players. So hopefully that gives a bit of perspective.
All right. So Adelaide's first up.
Yes.
And straight after this, we're basically going to jump into the Ben Keays interview. So, enjoy that. And, it should be pretty interesting.
He was an absolute delight to talk to. And I think I've even turned you into a Ben Keays supporter after this interview. He seems like a very, very good lad.
All right, let's get stuck into it. Here we go. We're the pride of South Australia. All right, listeners, we have a very special guest on the show today. One of the most talked about players on the pod, a cult hero among our listeners, the one and only Ben Keays. How you going, mate?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure, mate. Just before we begin, I just wanted to say that I personally have always been a huge fan. I've never doubted you in fantasy at all. Never said a bad word about you. And can you please just never go through my Twitter history? That'd be great.
That's absolutely crap, man. I am the number one Ben Keays supporter in Australia. I think I've got like an absolute swag of followers now as well after his sensational 2020 season for the Crows. He just kind of came from nowhere and just become an absolute fantasy jet.
Yeah, all right. Well,
so
I'll pay that.
You have any of the credit, mate.
All right. We'll pay that. Our listeners don't know that I'm bullshitting anyway.
Fan base,
all right, mate. We'll get stuck in. So here we go. So look, you've last year you kind of found yourself home in the Crows midfield, and in fantasy you're listed as a forward. So in keeper leagues, people were pretty delighted with the numbers you put up, especially playing in that position. Forwards are pretty hard to come by. This year you've lost your forward status though, and you're a mid only. So the question is, where do you see yourself playing this year, and is there any chance of you getting some more forward time to earn that forward status back, or where do you think you'll be playing this year?
I definitely think it's possible. I like playing through the midfield. Obviously, that was my natural sort of go from juniors. But sort of as you get in the AFL system, you start getting thrown around a bit more, and sort of get thrown in different roles. But yeah, I'll definitely roll through the forward line, I reckon. Always sort of been a mid forward, but I spent some time on the wing last year, which I enjoyed, and obviously spent some time inside when we had a few injuries and that. So can do quite a number of things now. So it'd be just see if I either nail down a spot or keep getting used as sort of a utility. So it's definitely possible.
All right. Our listeners will be pleased with that. A lot of people are hoping you get the forward status back anyway.
I'm hoping you stay in the midfield, Ben, and just keep racking up big numbers. That's what I'm about. Look, apart from yourself, mate, one of the guys I loved watching last year at the Crows was the young bull, Harry Schoenberg. Do you know if he's had a good off-season, or has he had a bit of a big Christmas back home? What do you know about Harry?
Mate, I actually live with Harry, and he's standing about 5 metres away from me in his bedroom, and he's been fantastic. He's had a great off season. He's a ripping fella. Yeah, love living with Harry. He's a good player. We both went pick 24 in our respective drafts as well, so there was a little bit of a sort of link there, which we thought was interesting. So we're pretty close, and I like mentoring him and working with him, and he's an absolute gun player. He's gonna be very good, I reckon. So he's a joy to play with.
One to have on your radar for sure as fantasy watchers. Now, I'm tipping for Rory Sloane to kind of get back to some good form in 2021. Had a bit of a quiet year last year. I think he had a few injuries in the preseason. Is he kind of tracking all right? And the big question is he as nice a bloke as everyone says he is?
Yeah, to answer that last question, he absolutely is. He's just a ripper. I love him. He had a few. I think he had a thumb injury, which set him back for quite a while. He's had thumb surgery during the year, so that obviously affected him a bit. But yeah, he'll be looking to bounce back. He's the ultimate professional. So one of those guys that's definitely not going to drop off as he sort of gets older. He's so important for us as well. Obviously, young group, leadership-wise, he's so important. And, he just bleeds for the Adelaide Footy Club, which I love. So, I'm definitely tipping him to have a big 21.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of coaches looking at him just because he's has dropped a bit in value, I think, as well. So, if he bounces back, a lot of people will be happy with that. All right, so a big question. So, Brad Crouch is, obviously taken off, moved to St Kilda. So, you're now the number one midfielder, obviously, at the Crows.
100%.
So, but there is a kid you've picked up from GWS named Jackson Hayley, which we're both big fans of. So, where do you see him slotting in? Do you reckon he's straight into the midfield? Is he on a halfback role? What do you think he's going to do this year?
I reckon he'll get used to in the midfield. He's been ripping, Nick. He's strong, and he's actually a very good runner as well. He actually surprised me a bit with his long distance running in the first couple of weeks pre-Christmas. So didn't know that he had that sort of tank. So that's always good to see. And she's probably just starved a bit of opportunity in that gun GWS side that has so many gun players. So I reckon he'd be a perfect replacement for Brad Crouch. He'll be exciting to watch.
We love to know guys are tearing up the track in the pre-season. So if he's got a good running tank, you've got a pretty good running tank too, don't you, Ben? You usually win the time trials. How'd you go before Christmas?
Yeah, no, I'm up there. I've never actually won a time trial in my career, but I'm always up sort of around the mark. So
nice.
We're actually doing it on Saturday, so hopefully I'm up there again. But I think Lockie Scholl is the favourite to win this year. He's come out of nowhere with his running. He's flying from a running perspective. So I reckon he's the tip to win. And yeah, I think me, Jacko, and Chase Jones won't be too far behind.
Very nice. Now, how big is AFL fantasy amongst the Crows boys? I see a few of the lads like Tommy Doday and Rory Laird get into the NFL stuff. Is there anyone into the AFL side of stuff?
There wasn't an AFL league this year. At Brisbane, we did an AFL league, a draft league every year.
Nice.
I did that a couple of times. But no, there's a Premier League fantasy. There's an NFL one as well. I think some of the boys do NBA as well. So there's all sorts of fantasy leagues going around. I've done it for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm not sure whether to get back into it or not. Sort of like just switching off. I found myself when I did do fantasy, start to watch games and focus in on your fantasy players, and you don't end up actually watching the game, which is probably important for someone to sort of watch other teams. I ended up just watching players and wanting them to pick up possessions. So
I know that feeling.
Well, it's very important for actual AFL players to take note of their own fantasy scoring, so us fantasy coaches can get some good scores on the back of it. So make sure you get the league up and running, so they all pick themselves and go all right in that.
A few 1-2s coming out of defence or something like that, mate, will be great for my fantasy side of it next year if you can do that.
Yeah. It's not nice when you're playing reserves and you're sitting there watching your senior team play and you're actually cheering for the opposition players to tear your team up. So I think that's the point where you say probably should step back from this.
That's fair enough. All right. So there's a lot of fresh faces down at West Lakes now. So you got Tilthorpe who comes in as a big man, but players like Sam Berry and Luke Pedler put up some seriously good junior fantasy numbers. Do you see any of those boys getting a game early?
Yeah, I think they're all a chance. All three that you just mentioned, they're all obviously got pretty big raps on them from juniors, or from what I've heard at least. And there's a couple of the guys you mentioned, Pedler and Berry. They're bulls. They look like absolute inside bulls that can really win the footy. So they're probably good options for the cheaper sort of first year players that might play early and make some cash. So. I definitely think they're going to add good value to our team and really push some of the older boys to make sure they keep improving and try and hold their spots because they got these bulls knocking on the door.
Nice. Now, while we're touching on that, is there any smokies from the Crows who you think might be a good breakout? You said Lockie Scholl's tearing up the track. Anyone else that's good for the Crows and probably even for your old side Brisbane? Anyone that kind of flies under the radar fantasy-wise or that you've heard of who's having a good pre-season back at Brisbane?
For us, I think Wayne Miller is probably going to be one to watch out for. He obviously had a pretty disappointing 2020 with a foot injury that dragged on after round one. So it was disappointing to be able to not get more games into him. But he's a special talent. He's a fantastic bloke. He's got a mature head on his shoulders, and he's done everything right to get back. So and he racks the footy up and uses it really well. He's one of our best ball users. So he's probably one from Adelaide to look out for. And probably back from Brisbane, I reckon as a ruck option, Tom Fullerton could be a big chance to push up now that Steph Martin's moved on to the Western Bulldogs. There's sort of a void there, which Oscar McInerney might fill, but I reckon Tom Fullerton might be a good second option there as a ruckman.
That's a big scoop. I didn't even have him on radar, so thanks for that, mate.
Add that to the black book.
Yeah, definitely.
Moving up the draft ranks now. Listeners will be bumping him up too. All right, this question is mainly directed at Keays, but you can tune in here, Ben, because it is about you. So, Keays, you own Ben Keays in our keeper league.
I do,
all right, and we talked about earlier that he's lost his forward status. Now mid-only, it makes a tough decision to keep him in your keeper league team. And this is a question our listeners want to know as well. The question is, will you be keeping Ben in 2021? And, does he make your best 16 players in your squad?
Well, luckily enough, Ben's on my rookie list because I saw him when I picked up his last year at Brisbane because I thought he was going to jump in that Brisbane side, but unfortunately didn't get there. But then when he came to Adelaide and just absolutely started dominating, I was very happy. But if you think about it, mate, I don't know if you know this, Ben, but you were the 137th best fantasy scorer in AFL last season. So if that's not worthy of a keeper league spot, I don't know what is. So
fair enough.
I'm not going to let Hef, have a go at you, mate. You are definitely on the up, and I think a big 2021's in store for you, mate. I'm just feeling really good about
top 150 is a very good result for me. I'm very happy.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pat yourself on the back. Was it top 3 in the BNF and top 137 AFL fantasy, mate? That is what a year.
We actually have a saying 2G4P, which means you're too good for the podcast because we only talk about the lesser knowns, and you actually got 2P status last season. So
I'll bring you up every episode. Don't worry about that. And last question before we let you go, mate. I saw a bit of sneaky modelling happening in the off season. A little bit of Noosa longboards work. Is that something for a mate? Is it good gear? What's the inside scoop there? Is this a little career path after footy? What's the go?
Yeah, my good friend Ash from Brisbane, someone I sort of grew up with, his dad, run Noosa longboards, so it was a little favour to them. Got a little bit of cash as well and a bit of free merch, and I love the Noosa longboards merch, so I was happy to help out. And yeah, it's reached more people than I thought it would, to be honest. So yeah, I might have to keep that in the back pocket and see if there's something post footy.
Yeah, mate, you might have to renegotiate a contract there if you're selling all the...
especially after this podcast, there's going to be thousands of people jumping on, so yeah. All right, mate. Well, thanks for your time. Our listeners will have loved hearing from you, given how much we talk about you on the pod, so keep up the good work at the Crows, and good luck for 2021.
No worries, boys. Appreciate it. Thanks for having the chat.
Cheers, mate.
See ya. There you go, legends. Our very first AFL player guest on the podcast, Ben Keays, having a chat to us about all sorts of things, really.
Yeah.
Lots of good info there. I guess the Jackson Hayley stuff, the young guns that are going to be coming through the Crows list. Some really good insight there as well.
Well, he did give us the hot tip on Lockie Shoal being the fittest bloke at the Crows.
And what happened?
He took out the time trial ahead of Ben on the weekend. So.
I mean, he predicted the future.
He did. So that's how bloody good Ben Keays is. Finally, you've woken up.
Exactly. Oh, I love the guy now. He's my favourite person in the world. So I won't go into the Keeper League group password. That's something for the gold members, joke that they can enjoy. I feel like a dick for actually mentioning that now. But,
yes, you're a massive dick, but we won't touch that. But look, hopefully we can get a couple more AFL players on over the pre-season. We've got a few feelers out there. So it's been a good little interview. So hopefully if we can get a few more of them, it will shine a bit of light on some of the youngsters at some of these clubs around the competition.
Definitely. All right, Kays, let's get stuck into the Crows. So you've had a look at their best 22s. Do you want to read them out from defence?
Sure. We'll start off with the backline: Tom Duday, Daniel Talia, Luke Brown, then Rory Laird, Fisher Mackesy, Wayne Miller. Through the wing, Brodie Smith, Rory Sloane and Lockie Shoal. Then we have Tom Lynch, Taylor Walker, Shane McAdam, with Elliot Himmelberg, Darcy Fogarty and Lockie Murphy. In the rucks, we've got Riley O'Brien, Matt Crouch and Jackson Hayley. On the interchange, James Rowe, Ben Keays, Harry Schoenberg and Riley Thilthorpe. I also mentioned my emergencies, who I think are around the mark, which is Jake Kelly, Will Hamill, Andrew Mcpherson and Mitch Hinge.
Thilthorpe, you got a list, mate.
Thilthorpe. That's his name, isn't it?
Tilthorpe, I reckon. Okay. I love picking away your pronunciations. Anyway, on Tilthorpe, you've gone very tall in the side. So is that an oversight? Do you think on reflection? Do you think they'll go that tall? Because I've noticed there's no Chase Jones in there. What's going on?
He's not even best 28. Look, yes, we put the teams out online yesterday, and I did get a bit of feedback saying I've gone in too tall. Probably on reflection, that's a fair crack. My kind of reasoning behind that side is I still think Walker and Fogarty are the two main forwards up there.
Yep.
With O'Brien, I think they need someone to back up ruck, and it's not going to be Fogarty or Walker. So they need Himmelberg in there as that player to kind of pinch hit in the ruck when Rob's having a rest.
Well, Tilthorpe's touted as that kind of next ruck.
That's true. Well, so. My problem with him is I'm not sure they're going to throw him right into the ruck straight away. Plus, I think that the Crows really want to play him front up because he's basically the number one pick in the draft.
For sure.
The Crows' best ever draft pick. I think they want to show him off to the fans early. So that's why I've kind of got him in there. But on the flip side, it wouldn't surprise me if someone like Mcpherson or maybe even Mitch Hinge. I think I wish I talked to Ben about him last week because I think he might be around the mark because he was playing some footy at Brisbane last year. So I think that Mcpherson or Hinge might be around that mark to kind of come in for one of those tools.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. You said Mcpherson as well. So he's definitely something the Crows fans are keen on or a player they're keen on. So yeah, we'll see what actually happens there. But that's Keays' best 22. They're out on the socials, so if you agree or disagree, make sure you comment and let him know about it. Heap shit on him.
Tell me I'm wrong. Everyone has so far, so keep it coming.
All right, we'll get stuck into some players. So first up, a player that's come back to the pod, hashtag B2P. Never been on the pod before, and that is Rory Sloane, the Crows captain. Poor Rory. He had a down year last year, and he was in and out with injury, so we can't blame him too much. But because he's outside of the top 150 fantasy scorers, he's back to the pod. Look, he only averaged 60.8 last season, which is a BCV of 75.7. And he started the year right. He had a score of 78, but nothing to note after that. And I think the injury, the thumb was hampering him after that. I guess there was a big layoff in between round 1 and 2, which didn't help either. Just couldn't get a run on last year. But looking at his history, his lowest average over the last 5 years was 90. He averaged 107 in 2017 and 106 in 2016. He's just too good of a player not to bounce back. So I think he's a good trade target this year because his value is going to be low. The only issue is he's like our league, a Crow supporter owns him, then you're not going to get him at all. But his value will be low going on the back of last year. And if people haven't been keeping up and didn't follow the injuries and stuff like that, you might be able to get him cheaper in the trade. So he'll be kept in most leagues, I think, but I think the value is in the trade and target him there, I think.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Look, for my side, who I feel is in the window this year, I think he's a guy I would love to target. Unfortunately, he is owned by a Crows supporter, so got zero chance in hell of that happening. But I think he's one, in a normal league, you could potentially get for a decent trade for a promising young guy if you do need some grunt in that midfield. Look, he turns 31 at the start of this season, so he is getting on. He's probably still got another, 1, 2, 3 good years of footy and fantasy footy left. He's that kind of player where he's not going to drop off his standards. So one to target if you can. If you're starting up keeper league, I think he's going to slide a fair bit. But I don't think that's a bad thing at all because you'll get some really good depth in that midfield with him midway through a startup draft, I reckon.
All right, Keays, I didn't bring a towel in here, but you're going to get a bit hot and bothered and sweaty talking about this next guy. Who is it?
Well, it's Action Jackson Hayley. And boy, oh boy, have you seen the pictures of him in the off-season?
I haven't actually.
Seriously, man.
I've heard about the pictures.
He is like a non-green Hulk. He is that ripped. He has biceps bigger than my head, and that's quite large. Look, I love that he's got that running ability as well that Ben touched on. He said he was surprised at how fit and how good a runner he was. So genuinely look out for him this season. I think he looks immoral to slot into that midfield spot vacated by Brad Crouch and potentially looks to be one of the biggest breakout candidates of 2020, I reckon. He BCV turned up in round 3 of 2020, but did have limited opportunities last year at the Giants, which we know. So look, I think we've seen his potential. It's been in glimpses, but now is his time. Look, he's got the opportunity. He's got proven scoring history. He's both a kid playing in the SNFL a couple of years ago as an 18-year-old. Plus, look, he's shown some stuff in the AFL too, and it's third-year breakout, which we know is an absolute moral. So he is chips in for me. I think whether you're taking him startup draft, if you can somehow get your hands on him in a established keeper, and then even in your generic AFL fantasy salary cap style, I think he's one you got to have because I think he could go to the next level this year.
Yeah, absolutely, genuine breakout contender, like one of those ones that you're kind of just sure of pre-season.
Yeah.
So yeah, I reckon he's going to be he's just going to go gangbusters this year, or even if he doesn't go huge, he's still going to develop and get that development in the Crows. Like after the Ben interview, just knowing that he's probably going to play midfield this season, I just can't see he doesn't develop into something half decent. Given his history, given what we've seen him put up at GWS just in those few games that he has played, I'm just as keen as you are, Keays. I'm looking forward to Jackson Hayley.
Lock him in.
Owned by another Crow supporter in our league, so the same one. He's got them all. Might even have this guy too.
He probably does actually.
Yeah. And that is Wayne Miller. So he was a breakout candidate last year. Really, he had averages of 75 and 76 in 2018 and 19 respectively. So many people thought he was ready to go in 2020, but unfortunately he suffered a foot injury and needed surgery, ending his 2020 campaign. So he played 2 games last year and had 63 in the first game, which is a 78.5 BCV. And I've said this on the members only podcast. I can't wait to stop saying BCV, but I'm going to say it all night and I'm going to say it all preseason, which is going to suck. But anyway, he only had 40 in his second game. He obviously wasn't right with the injury, but he should be right to go this year. But the big question is, can he bounce back post injuries, having a year off? Can he become a breakout contender this year? For Miller, I think he's role dependent. So if he can play in defence, I think he'll be good.
Yep.
I just think the Crows like playing him up forward, which is a pain in the ass. He can also play on the wing as well. Like, he's that versatile. He's just that kind of running outside type that he could play either of those roles. I've just got the inkling that he's going to play it forward, and it's not going to be good for his fantasy scoring. Especially if, he's playing forward. The Crows don't get the ball up there that much as well. So it's going to be a bit of a worry. But we'll stick to the preseason. We'll have a look at where he plays, and hopefully he goes okay. But look, he's definitely got potential, and he's definitely one to monitor over the preseason. Like I said, if he's playing in the back line, I'm keen on him, or if he's pushes up to a wing, I'm keen. I just don't know where he's actually going to play. There seems to be a heap of halfback flanker types. You got Mcpherson, Hamill, Scholl rolls through there. Then you've got Laird is talking about moving the midfield. So is Brodie Smith, but I just don't see where he gets into that defence, and I can just see him being stuck up forward. What do you reckon?
Well, I definitely have him on my halfback line. I think he's too good a user for the Crows not to be back there when he's fit. He uses the ball so well. Obviously, I think Ben said in that interview too that he's looking pretty good this preseason, and he expects him to bounce back. He's one of his kind of breakout candidates. But if you're talking about going forward, like they've still got Tom Lynch, McAdam, Murphy. I think they've recruited James Rowe up there for a reason. Even, God forbid, Chase Jones gets a game. I think he's much better suited at the halfback line for the Crows. Also, BCV, for those who don't know, who are new to the podcast, is before coronavirus. So basically, averages that happened in 2020 have all been kind of altered to be regular scores. So
and we can thank Warnie if he's still watching for coming up with that term.
Yes.
So. Thank you. All right, makes it very handy instead of saying before this happened or before the bad stuff happened.
Yes.
Anyway, let's talk about Lachie Scholl. So I really like this kid. Been following him for a while. Purely a couple of years ago, we used to do the From the Twos sections. We'd read out names every week that kind of went nuts in the twos, and hopefully we're bringing that back this year when the twos actually come back. So he put up some good numbers there. So 2019, he averaged 71.8 for the Crows reserves, and I think this is pretty good for a skinny kid. And he turned up, and a few scores in the 90 as well at sample level, playing against built men when he's 18 and pretty small. Debuted in round 10 last season though versus Melbourne, playing across half back, and he started really slow. I think his best score from his first 6 games was 57. Then he had 47 after that, and did some really low scores. But then he moved on to a wing to finish off the season, and then went bang for the last 2 games. So he had a 72 and an 89 in his last 2 games, and had a Supercoach ton in round 17 as well versus the Blues. So Crows were trying a lot of different types off halfback, and I just don't know if he fit that halfback line that well. So I think with Mcpherson and Hamill, we mentioned them before, those are the types I reckon that are going to go into those roles. I think Scholl should stay on a wing, and I think there's a bit of an opening there as well with Seaman kind of on the outer as well. So we talked about Miller coming back. That could be interesting as well if he goes to a wing. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But I'm confident Scholl is going to be a good fantasy player. Maybe this year, maybe not. Worst case this year, he's going to be a stash, but a very good stash at that.
Yep, I think the wing role's him. He's obviously super fit. The opportunity's there. I think he's a pretty solid lock for a best 22 spot for most of the year, I think.
Yep.
I'm going to touch on Andrew Mcpherson. So he finally got his body right in 2020. That was his 3rd year at AFL level. Former South Australian under-18 vice-captain. So pretty highly regarded, and put some good numbers up back in the SNFL under-18 days. So the Crows have always regarded him quite highly, and he did impress a lot of people in his 9 games last year. So he averaged 46, which was a 58 BCV, with his best game coming against the Dons, where he scored a 69, which equivalated, or whatever, turned into an 86 BCV. So that was a 19-touch game, which is nothing to sneeze at in your first year of footy. So interesting for me if he keeps that spot in the best 22. We do see Miller coming back. We didn't see much Tom Doedee either last year. So does he kind of hold that position? I'm not 100% sure. That's why I've got him in my emergencies. He did win the Mark Bickley Emerging Talent Award last year, and a couple others. So
they must rate him.
The Crows obviously rate him quite highly if they're giving out that award. And look, at his best, I think he's going to be a very handy depth option this year. Gives himself another opportunity to cement his spot in that best 22. And I think for some of these guys who are on that, who we're just not sure about, like your Mcphersons, those kind of guys, having reserves footy back this year is going to be massive, because they're actually going to get to play footy against other teams, other people, and put their best case forward to kind of develop as a footballer. So if it's not this year, I think there is a bit of possibility for him to be a really handy, defender fantasy-wise for a few years to come.
Yeah, not super solid in his fantasy work, but I do think he'll be a handy backup. He's somebody who should get a fair run this year, especially when the Crows are developing. They're the types he's going to want to play.
He'll throw a few guys around.
Yeah, for sure. So as a defender as well, can be handy, for cover and things like that. Don't expect, the world, but it's going to be interesting to to see how he develops this year.
And lastly, Harry Schoenberg.
I wish I brought that towel.
One of my boys.
Sweaty
I've got a couple of boys at the Crows now. It's good. Look, he had some very, very good under-18 Sandful numbers in his draft year, and I think he's one who would have benefited immensely from a reserves comp last year because he's built like an absolute brick shit house, and he looked the goods when he came in and played for the Crows last year. So only had the 51 BCV average last year, but did have a big 82 point, which turned into a fantasy ton BCV game against the Blues in round 17. So he does have that fantasy prowess. Now, for me, the stats alone don't tell the true story about Schoenberg's last year. He just looked like he belonged at AFL level, has some elite speed, especially in traffic. He just dodged and weaved, and it was like almost, the old Scott Pendlebury, everyone's dancing around him when he was on his game. Now, do yourself a favour, if you don't believe me, check out some of his highlights. And the thing that I saw, because I was watching him quite closely because he was in my team last year, he was in the right spots a lot of the time. A lot of the time, the ball just didn't get to him. So for me, I reckon he's getting to the right spots. Obviously, the Crows are developing. Sometimes it doesn't always get to the right person at the right time. So I think he could be a very, very special midfielder, Hef. And I think this year, because fantasy coaches get him as a forward, he is one that you want to get your hands on for sure. So this is how much I rate him. I'm going to keep him in my 16 as that breakout chance smoky. Look, and I'm sure a lot of people won't because a lot of people aren't as crazy as me and probably as invested in him as I am. But look, possibly on his average, I think that he's one that could slide quite late in a draft, which is great for potential coaches because he's going to be a good forward option late in drafts, and I think he's got so much upside. So if you own him, I would implore you to keep him because I think he is a generational talent.
I think I'm going to start the first argument of 2021.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
So apart from that BCV 82, sorry, BCV 102, the 82 he scored.
Yes.
Didn't he have scores of like 26? Like they were all like under 50, like around the 40 mark.
Well, he averaged 50.
I just see that as an outlier.
Okay, so every year someone has to keep Clayton Oliver. Every year someone has to keep so and so who.
But even
they didn't have a great year, but they're going to be good, and this is him.
But there was bigger raps on those players.
I'm invested.
What was he picked 26 or something like that? Like those, like Clayton Oliver was a first rounder. Like
if he's good, he's good. You're always the one who bangs on about draft order doesn't matter. If they're a good fantasy player, they're a good fantasy player no matter where they're taken. So you can't have it both ways, mate.
He just looks like thick and chunky. He's
had the world's best preseason according to Ben. He's going to be fit and firing, ready to roll.
He just doesn't look like a fantasy footballer to me. Just in the way he plays, the way he's built. I reckon he's going to be like a really good inside ball.
I want someone some feedback on this list.
Someone like a Ben Cunnington or something like that. But just
that.
Those fantasy scores of like fuck all this year. It was awful.
It's his first year of footy, man.
But there was even people like Lockie Scholl, skinny little dweeb, like comes out and scores big. Like
in his third year of footy.
That's true. Still,
he's fresh out of under 18 football, and he played some super footy.
Oh no, there was plenty of 18-year-olds that went bigger in fantasy.
Crows fans, get behind me, or Harry Schoenberg fans, get behind me. He's a good player.
We probably should end that argument there. Definitely tweet us what do you think about Harry Schoenberg. I'm off him, Keays is on him, so we'll move on from there.
When we get him on the pod next year, you're going to be stuck in again.
Well, we've got a contact now. We can just give Ben a call and hand it over, pass him to the bedroom.
Hand over the phone.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our next team of the night, and that is the Brisbane Lions. All right, on to the Brisbane Lions.
Yes, so I'll start off with my best 22 for the Lions this year. Starting from the back line, Brandon Stufcevich, Harris Andrews and Grant Birchall. Then Daniel Rich, Darcy Gardner and Zack Bailey. Through the mid-line, Hugh McLuggage, Jared Lyons and Mitch Robinson. Half-forward line of Charlie Cameron, Joe Danaher and Lincoln McCarthy. Forward line, Cam Rayner, Eric Hipwood and Nakia Cockatoo. In the ruck, we've got Oscar McInerney, Lockie Neal and Dane Zorko. On the bench, Jared Berry, Dan McStay, Noah Answorth and Callum Archie. And my emergency list contained Ryan Lester, Cam Ellis-Yeoman, Devon Robertson and Caden Coleman.
I think the most controversial call there, which we saw today, was Nakia Cockatoo.
Straight in. I'm going to discuss him later in this.
Barely seen him play in the last 3 years.
Okay.
No, but I mean, and then he comes into a side that probably should have gone close to all the way last year.
Yeah.
I don't know if he comes straight in like that. I have no doubt that if they can get his body up and running, get him fit and firing, all that sort of stuff. One of our mates was saying he had a dad bod at the moment, so not that there's anything wrong with that. I've got a pretty nice one myself, but
I let you drink Remedy Kombucha.
That's
daily,
true, actually. Yeah, shed a few kgs over the off season, all thanks to Remedy Kombucha, obviously. But anyway, so that's the biggest controversial call. So definitely let us know what you think about that one. The other thing is as well, and this is one of our listeners actually mentions this, and I agreed with him. I wish I wrote down what his name was. Apologies, but you'll know who you are. Who wrote it? Your defense is really short as well. Especially, they like to play Harris Andrews pretty loose as well. So Ryan Lester came in late last year and played a pretty good job there. So that's something else I can see in there. So you might have to make way for one or two, but you've got a pretty reasonable emergency list. So I don't mind it overall. It's a pretty easy side to pick, really, Brisbane.
It's pretty solid.
Yeah,
not much has changed since last year. It's just really Danaher and Cockatoo coming in there and that. So you'd have to think they're a pretty good chance to nudge the flag again this year.
Absolutely. All right, let's get stuck into some players. Case, who got first up?
I'm going to start off with Zack Bailey now. He's a guy I was pretty keen on last year, and unfortunately I don't think he'll be flying under the radar this year as a centre forward DPP. Now, he actually ended up being the 6th best scorer at the Lions last year, and he's a guy I'm a very big fan of. He almost notched up 2 Corona hundreds last year with 96s and 97s, and they kind of turned into BCV's 120, which is very, very nice. So he's a genuine running utility, and to get him as a forward this year is an amazing get, because I think he could easily dominate off a wing or half back while he's got that forward status. He has a fantastic kick to handball ratio, knows where the goals are as well, running through that wing or even off the half back flank, and he just gets those handy amounts of marks and tackles each game. Just always notches up 4 or 5 of them. They're just great fantasy point makers. So look, he's a guy I have to have. He's going to be a very, very good player. I think starting a new league, I think he's a very, very good player to take too, because I feel that he's just going to be one of those guys that's always going to have DPP, like you either float into forward DPP or maybe get it back, almost kind of like a Lockie Whitfield type fantasy-wise. So big raps on Zack Bailey. I think he's got the goods.
The only thing that concerned me was when he was scoring well last year, he seemed to be playing defence, and then he got moved forward and started to go downhill a bit. Now he's listed as a forward. Does he keep playing as a forward this season? I could easily see him going back again and scoring well, but if he's playing as a forward, it does worry me a little bit, because we did see that drop off. But that said, it could have just been like adjusting to a new role, give him a year in the off-season, a bit more development, and training with forwards for a whole pre-season. Could be okay. I think just with the scarcity of forwards this year, he's going to be pretty handy anyway.
Yep.
I just worry that, that role change that kind of came mid last year might have affected him a bit more than it should have.
Look, I think, with Nakai Cockatoo coming in, you've got Cameron, McCarthy, Rayner, Zorko's probably going to play a lot more up forward this year.
And I can't think
he's going to be more handy on a wing or half back.
And that's what I was going to say. I can't see him getting like a perma wing role, because they've got pretty good wings, I guess, at the moment. So, it's going to be interesting. Like, it just seems like he should slot into defence, but who knows what Brisbane are thinking. So, all right, you're on a roll, Kays. We'll keep you going.
I'm going to keep rolling. It's Joe Danaher, the next guy we're going to talk about. Look, for me, it's pretty simple here. If he is fit, he's a top 20 forward. It's just a big bloody if, though. So 2017 was the last time he got a full season in. He was actually the 71st best scorer in fantasy football that year. So that's how good a season he had. Look, we got that glimpse of his best last year when he played against Hawthorn at Adelaide Oval. Had the 85 points there, 106 BCV, had 13 kicks, 1 handball, kicked 3 goals, 3, and took a whopping 10 marks. Now, that is an at his best Joe Danaher kind of game. So, look, I think going to a better side at Brisbane, and he's also got a really good foil up there in Eric Hipwood, which might take a bit of heat off him. I reckon he could be anything this year. If he is fit, he could easily be a top 20 forward, as I said. So, look, would I keep him? He's a really, really risky keep because obviously you don't know what his body's like. You really want to see some pre-season stuff there from him. But as a keeper, I'm not sure I'd be quite sold on taking him just because I'm not sure his body's right. Obviously, we've got the pre-seasons looking at it. But on the flip side, you can say that forwards are very light on this year.
Exactly.
And we know what Joe Danaher can do, even in that game last year and what he's done in 2017. So I think he's one you could target early in drafts. I think, if you did drop him off your list, you could probably pick him up earlier on in draft and get some good forward cover and just hope he gets back to his best, because I think the whole comp would love Joe Danaher playing good footy again. He's very exciting to watch.
I think you've summed it up pretty well. That game he came back, it was in Adelaide. Was it against Hawthorn in Adelaide?
Correct.
Yeah, it was something weird like that. It was at like 4:30.
Yeah.
I was walking my dog.
Yeah, I was at work.
Yeah, and I was listening to it on the radio, and he started heating up, and I remember I sprinted back home to actually watch it. Yep. So it was absolute gun that game. That's what we want to see every week from Joe Danaher. And I think because you've seen him be able to produce that, and not just last year, in the past as well, he's someone you've got to pick up if he's available at the right time. You know, that kind of middle of your redraft, maybe early-ish if you want to be
early.
bold.
I think people are going to be keen on him, especially if he has a good preseason. He's a very big monitor preseason.
Not in your first, if on right now, like who knows after, what is it called now? Not Marsh series, it's called the Amy series.
Don't know.
Anyway, we're so loyal to the brands here at the Keeper League, so we'll make sure we get it right. So we have to monitor that obviously and see how he goes. If he is tearing up, then I'd be happy to go earlier on him. But right now, he's kind of like not your first couple of rounds. Start looking at round 3, round 4, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. That's where I'd go anyway. No doubt.
Amy series.
Yeah. No doubt there'll be coaches out there that go harder at him though as well, and I'm happy to let him go through the keeper if that's the case. Anyway, I'll get stuck into one. Mitch Robinson, another back to pod candidate. So B2P, welcome back, Mitch. So he battled a bit last season. He averaged 57, which was the BCV of 71.7, which isn't bad, but it's a bit lower than what he did in previous years. His top score was in round 1. He scored 93, but it was all downhill from there. And I think really battled with a few of the younger outside players coming on as well. Your Berry, your McGluggage, and to a lesser extent Bailey play a little bit on the wings as well. So he kind of got shifted around a little bit, and at times it seemed like he was in defence. It's time to seem like he was in forward, and we know he did play forward originally in the in the early days, and he is 31 now, so I wouldn't actually be surprised if he did get moved back up forward at some stage, because he can be a pretty handy contributor up there. So if he can get DPP there, then he might be valuable in your keeper league. So look. Good chance he's going to be back in pools after what he produced last year, especially as a mid-only, only averaging 71. Mm-hmm. Good chance he could get dropped, and being 31 as well, that throws him out the door, especially for younger teams in keep leagues. So he might offer some value to those chasing a flag, I think, especially if he can play forward. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen, but there's a chance because he's done it before.
His last few seasons have been pretty impressive, just his consistency, and I think that will continue. But look, we were talking about Zack Bailey before. He's one who could easily pinch Mitch Robinson's wing if things turn that way. So probably a bit more risk this year than previously over the last couple of years, but he hasn't really done anything wrong that would make you drop off instantly. It's probably just an age thing, and yes, guys can fall off a cliff a bit when they get to their 30s, but look, he's still going to be pretty fit and still pretty hungry for footy, so still a solid mid option, I think.
Absolutely. All right, we'll move on. I'll keep going. We got Oscar Mcinerney next. So he is a ruck only this year. He's lost his forward status. So there's a few coaches hit hard with that because a lot of coaches out there already had a ruck and they're playing him as a forward. Now they've just got 2 rucks and you can't play them. So a lot of them will probably have Steph Martin though as well. So I know there's no handcuff anymore, so it's kind of a bit annoying there as well. But anyway, he's now the number 1 ruck at Brisbane though, so that's kind of handy for those people that own him. This is awesome because I guess coaches that don't have a ruck, he's probably going to be available in a lot of draft pools because I think a lot of people thought Archie Smith was the number 1 backup last year, and he's kind of come out of nowhere really. He stopped playing as much up forward and more in the ruck. Averaged 57 points last season, the BCV of 71.6. There's a lot of coaches out there saying he'll boom without Steph. But if you looked at last season, he still played 8 games with Steph last year, and he only averaged 2 points better with Steph out of the side. So it wasn't like he was just going huge. I'm not sure that's the deciding factor. I think what is the deciding factor is that he is just going to get more development, being the number 1 ruckman, and there's a good chance from there he develops. So a real positive on his season was that he averaged 68.4 from his last 10 games, and that's when you include finals. And then if it's from his last 3, that was 68.3 from his last 3, and that was all with Steph Martin as well. So there's definitely potential there, and you kind of saw this growth over the season. So that's why we look at late season averages on our website. We've got late season averages for every player in the competition, because over the course of the year, players can definitely pick up and develop further. So that's the reasons why I like Oscar Mcinerney. Never think he's going to be a superstar ruckman. I don't think he's going to be top 5 next year or anything like that, but he'll be serviceable and capable of being your number 1 ruck in your keep league side, especially those who struggle to get rucks, and that's been my side for years until I finally kind of got it sorted in the last couple of years. So if he's available, I'd even go first round on him if he was available. So.
Yeah. Look, I think he's going to be very good. And, you're talking about opportunity is what it's all about. So you go, look, maybe last year when the Lions thought, Steph Martin might have been there for another couple of years. They're on a premiership run. He's gone. Oscar Mcinerney is now the main guy at training for the next 6 months through preseason, etc.
Yeah,
he's going to have more time put into him. He's going to naturally develop and potentially lose a few kilos, get around the ground even better. Look, he could really take his game to the next level. It wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, as you said, if he's around in a pool and you do need that ruckman, he's one you should definitely be targeting
for sure. All right, now I'm on a roll, so I'll keep going. Cam Rayner. So he averaged 54 last season, which was not great, but it was a 9.3 improvement on 2019. So in shortened game time, that was really a positive, I found. Last year was his third year and didn't look like a kid anymore. He saw a slight uptick in the midfield time, which was probably where the extra points come from as well. I guess, can he go further? I'm not really sure. I can't see him getting more midfield time with their current makeup, but the positive is that he'll keep his forward status for years to come, I feel. So he's going to be one of those forwards that has stints through the midfield. So that's really handy. Just you can bank on him having it each year. There's quite a few forwards that you can't do that with, especially the good ones. I think he can develop into a handy like F3, F4. So he's definitely going to be a starting keeper player for you, like in your best 18. I just think it's almost time to just kind of let go of the aspirations of him being an absolute superstar and just focusing on him being a contributor to your side. You keep 16 players like us, he makes your top 16. That's fine. He's at the bottom end of it. But I just don't expect too much. That said, if he can get the role, it's not due to his lack of talent, I don't think. It's just due to how stacked the Brisbane midfield is. Zorko is probably on the way out, and he might go up forward a bit more. There's a few more aging blokes in there as well, but Robinson too. There's a chance that he could get more midfield time. But at the moment, as they're pushing really hard for a flag, I just don't see where it's coming from. So right now, I think he's that kind of F3 range at the moment, maybe F2 if he gets a bit of a wriggle on this year. But yeah, if he can add another 5-10 points to his game, he's going to be super handy. So,
but at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with being a good forward for your fantasy career. I know that's what he sets out to play footy for. But even someone like Toby Green, yes, he's probably on the elite level of the forwards, but what you're going to get each week from him. You're going to get some good scores, and people want guys like that. You want a regular scoring forward. So
for sure,
no dramas at all with that call. Charlie Cameron, who I'm going to talk about, he's basically a keeper league pod lock each week. We basically talk about him each week. The last 5 years, for example, he has averaged between 65 and 67 each year. So he's super, super consistent. Now, you could almost make a case to keep him in 2021, seeing as forwards are so light and because he's so consistent. So, his best games are completely scintillating. So, when he's on kicking bags, he had scores of 92 and 98 last year, which ended up being a 115, kind of 120 BCV. From looking at his stats, he usually needs 2 or more goals to kind of notch up a decent score. So,
but he gets them quite often.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you're looking at consistency, 11 of his 17 games were 50 points or more. So that was 62 plus, which is great for your, F4, F5, maybe even F3, depending on your league. So just super consistent. Look, I have him as more of a depth player in 2021 for your fantasy side, but with forwards being light on, and if you're looking at your side and you need to get it balanced, I've got no dramas with someone keeping someone like Charlie Cameron, because there is still going to, he's still young. He's still got the ability to kind of put a few more strings to his bow, maybe run up the ground a bit further, get a bit more ball higher up. So he could be one that could just be, once we're talking about someone like Cam Rayner, just a nice little forward lock, especially if you're keeping a few more players than your 10 or 12.
Yeah, I don't see him improving his fantasy scoring more than he has now. But it's more so that we saw last year, I guess, as well, with the way the team sheets were announced, and this could be a deciding factor this year. Nothing's really been announced for that. So with rolling lockouts and stuff like that, we saw more and more teams move to the rolling lockouts to align with the rolling team sheet that came out. So for me, he was the perfect player to just chuck on your bench in the forward line and just see whether he goes bang or not. So it's basically what he does. He either goes huge or little, and every second or third week he will put up a big score. So he's the perfect streamer for mine, and I think he's worth owning just on that fact, and also that he plays every week. So keeper league coaches would know that you get stuck with injuries quite often. It's always great to have players that you can just rely on to actually get a game, so you're never going to be playing with a donut, one short, and
knock
like
up a 65 each week.
Yeah.
If every player that's in your kind of lower levels of your D4, D5, F4, F5, if they're knocking out 65 each week, it's really happy days.
Absolutely.
And lastly, the player we've all been waiting to talk about, Nakia Cockatoo. So please, keeper league coaches, do not sleep on him. He is a genuine gun.
I'm going to sleep on him.
Now, I'll tell you why not to. I'll tell you why to set your alarm. While he hasn't played AFL for 2+ years, some of his numbers are very, very interesting. Now, obviously, the number one priority is just to get him fit. So that's what is going to happen at Brisbane. It happened with Lincoln McCarthy. They've got some sweet witch doctor up there who just gets all these injured players fit. It's going to happen with Joe Danaher. Bloody Brisbane might not lose a game this year.
I can't see it happening yet.
Technically, they haven't lost one yet, and they may not. So, look, he has had scores of 84 of 68% game time, 76 of 54% game time, and his last ever AFL game, which was 2 and a bit years ago, he had 67 points of 48% game time. Now, he's got some sweet TOG numbers. It's just the fact that he can't stay out there on the park long enough because he's just not fit. And that last game where he had 67 off 48% game time, he got injured. So, look, he's actually got a really good kick-to-handball ratio and his tackle numbers are very, very good. He's going to slide a lot because he's just kind of one of those names where people have almost forgotten about how good he is. But I'm telling you, don't. Look, I'm not saying take him early in a draft or anything like that. I'm saying I think he's going to slide, but I think you could get a really good bargain because if he gets fit, there's definitely a spot in the side for him. And from what we've seen previously, his TOG scoring is amazing. He just needs to get on that park and he could be one who could be a real game changer this year.
Yeah, like there's no doubt he's a super talent. My concern was just does he come straight in, especially with the little amount of footy that he's played. But when he does play, he's going to be starting. Now, those time on ground and points per minute numbers, I guess, are pretty outstanding. And just a bit of a plug as well. Daryl, one of our new listeners and now new writer, I guess, he wrote an article a few weeks ago and worked out all the points per minute numbers for the last 5 years and then compared also 2020 numbers to 2019. So you can work out better BCV scoring or more accurate BCV scoring as well. So if you're keen to check out some PPM, some point per minute numbers, head to our website, keeperleaguepod.com.au, free spreadsheet to download that has every player's points per minute numbers for the last 5 years. So super awesome work there. But Nakia Cockatoo, I'm looking forward to looking him up on that, especially to see how he compares with that, because those numbers, scores of 84 off 68% game times, that's unreal. So if we can get on the park for more than 20 minutes, he should be fine.
Yeah, basically.
A couple of monitors before we move on to Carlton. Devin Robertson and Eli Smith, we can kind of throw them in the same bag. Especially Devin Robertson was talked about as a super fantasy scorer as a junior, but just went to a club where the midfield is too strong and there's too many of his types in there. But if he can get a game, he can be a decent fantasy scorer. Eli Smith is more of an inside ball, and I think both of them actually I think they might actually both be forwards this year in fantasy. I know Eli Smith is, and I think they're training him as forwards purely because they can't fit them into that midfield. So if they do break in, that could actually be super handy. So issue is they probably will play forward and probably
I think they're two guys you should definitely have around your mark for your fantasy classic teams, and then monitor or just even have pick up late in a draft as more as a stash. Yeah,
if they're not playing, they're not worth picking up in fantasy classic teams. But if they're in your drafts, you pick up in your last rounds or rookie list like us, then we've got an extra year if we do that. That's kind of the perfect picks for that, I reckon.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on to Carlton. All right, the old dark navy blues case. Let's hear your best 22 for them.
The best 22. You can critique it tomorrow when it hits the social medias or today because it's coming out then. We haven't had the feedback from this just yet.
I think I might put it out tonight.
It's going out tonight. Yeah. So, all right. Well, anyway, hit me up. But we're starting in the back line. Nick Newman, Lockie Plowman and Liam Jones. A half-back line of Adam Sard, Jacob Wiedering and Sam Doherty. Across the midline, Zach Williams, Patrick Cripps and Sam Walsh. Half-forward line of Jack Martin, Levi Casbolt and Will Setterfield. Then we've got Eddie Betts, Harry Mackay and Michael Gibbons in the forward line. Followers, Tom De Koning, Mark Murphy and Ed Kerno. On the bench, Jack Nunes, Zach Fisher, Sam Petrefsky-Seaton and Mitch McGovern, with the emergencies of Mark Pitney, Charlie Kerno, Caleb Marchbank and David Cunningham.
Case, how on earth did you pick that side? There is so many players there that could be breaking into this Carlton team in 2021. It's pretty crazy to think about, really.
This side is, honestly, I've got no idea what's happening with Carlton. The only one I want to mention is what I've easily admitted, Charlie Kerno, because I don't think he'll actually be playing much footy this year. So I've just kind of thought, look, he's probably not going to make their side this year. So, look, for me, Hef, it's just Carlton's side drives me nuts, and I'm going to dissect it a bit later on. But look, honestly, you've got Lockie Fogarty, Sam Durden, who's new, Liam Carroll, Jack Nunes, Paddy Dow, O'Brien, Stocker, Kemp, Petrefsky, Seaton, Fisher, Cunningham, Philp,
So many
Gibbons.
players.
They're basically all the same player.
I don't know how you pick this team.
They're all half
how do you
forwards,
pick between
wings,
any of them?
Like they are all the same player. So, look, drafting Carlton players this year is an absolute nightmare, especially in that. Like, I think their backline's pretty settled. You know, you can make a case that Sam Petrefsky Seaton goes back on that half-back flank potentially, or in the back line. But bloody hell, that half-forward line wing role is
There's
just
30 blokes
absolute nightmare.
Yeah, did you have Fogarty in there?
No, because I don't think he's going to play in that side just yet. I don't know. You're hot him, but
I am.
I haven't seen enough that I don't think he's going to knock like Michael Gibbons out the side.
But I think blokes like Nunes and Fisher are easily replaceable.
Nunes, Fisher, even Petrefsky, Seaton.
Those last two spots are going to be up for grabs, definitely. You might see someone like Eddie Betts as well transition out a bit more this year.
Yeah,
as
and
well,
he's obviously picked up a bit of an injury in the off season too. So I suppose the other one, I've gone De Koning over Pitney.
Yeah, I agree with that pick though. Just judging the talent, we will talk about De Koning in a second. I do think he is the number one ruck going forward, and I do think that Carlton want to play one ruckman, as we saw earlier in the season as well. I think they just had to play in tandem to kind of blood De Koning. But I reckon with another pre-season under his belt, and I think De Koning was actually injured a bit at the start of last year as well.
And I think if they've got Levi Casbolt hanging around too, he's that natural backup ruck. They don't have to play both of them, so I think it's a big season for Pitney.
For sure. All right.
I'll start off with Michael Gibbons. So he was a real surprise packet last year. Ended up as the 35th best forward in the competition, which is pretty good for a guy in the second year and a mature age kind of player. So
it's almost the first page of forwards on Ultimate Footy.
Basically.
25.
Yeah.
Almost there.
Yeah. So went from a 62.4 to a 76 BCV average. So improved his output by 14 points a game, which is awesome. Even managed an actual Corona 100, notching up 106 against the Bombers in round 4. So look, he started the year as that small crumbing forward, the crafty kind of operator up there, but he actually showed how dominant he can be through the midfield, which is basically the role he started with when he was playing back at the VFL before he got drafted. So 6 of his 15 games, he had 15 plus posies, which is not too bad for a small forward kind of thing, and had a 25 touch personal best. So the best thing about him is his consistency. Really, as a forward, he only had 2 of his 15 games are below 50 BCV, which, you know, as most people would have had him as an F4, F5, probably picked up off the waiver wire or super late in the draft, take that every hour of the week. I think he's probably the best player of that kind of rat pack that I mentioned above, with the Nunes and Philps and all that kind of thing. So I think he can play a variety of roles, whether it's actually running through the midfield. If someone gets injured in the game, he's got that big enough body to kind of roll through that. Plays the half forward role pretty well, or could even just crumb if, Eddie Betts isn't there. So as a forward option this year, I think he's going to be pretty underrated. I think that some people will just kind of maybe forget actually how good he can be. Yeah. And you might get a bargain in a draft, because I'm not sure that many people will keep him, and I reckon you could get him kind of early to mid in a redraft.
Yeah, as a forward, he's gold this year, I reckon, as well, and he's probably going to be available in a lot of leagues as well. He was a good VFL scorer, so it's not like unusual to see it. It's just that no one would have picked it into AFL level, and yeah, you're right. There was so many people that just picked him up with I don't know any of the names of the players except for Michael Gibbons. I'll pick him, type of thing at the end of drafts and stuff like that. So pretty decent return last year. Got to be happy with that. And what do you average? 62.
76.
Yes, 76 BCV. So that's almost the 80 average. That's getting close. It's getting close. It's just that if he was, if he was a kid averaging that, you'd be all in on that. It's just that he's a bit older.
Yeah. But as a genuine, consistent forward this year, 2021's hard to find him. I think he's a good get.
For sure. All right, we'll move on to Lockie Fogarty, a bloke that I'm a big fan of. I have been for years, actually, since he first started out at Geelong and played quite a number of games in his first season. But look, he finds himself at Carlton this season. Looking back at 2020, he averaged 57.7. But just diving into some of those numbers, he had a decent score against West Coast in round 9. I've got 27 written there, but I reckon that's wrong. I don't think that's 27.
Round 27, shit.
Yeah, had a score of 27. That's not right. But sorry, now I get it now. Okay. Let's just refresh. I know what I'm trying to say here.
Right.
Good show.
Read your own notes.
Good show notes here. All right. He did have a score of 27 in round 9.
Yes.
All right, against West Coast.
Yes.
But if you take that away as a one-off bad game,
yes.
All right, his average jumps to 64.4.
Okay.
So that's a BCV 80. All right. That is 2G4P status.
Yes.
So, geez. Oh, sorry. I got to hit the 2G4P button.
One game. And he hasn't even proven it yet.
I know.
I just want to throw them around like...
I just wanted to press that button because we haven't pressed it tonight. So, anyway. Chris Scott always went on about how he likes to play on the midfield, but Geelong's midfield was basically just too strong. So he should get that midfield time at Carlton if he plays, I think, because, you know, behind Cripps, Walsh and an Asian Kerno, there's not a lot there, you know. They play blokes like Kennedy in there and having a Setterfield and, you know, randoms run through there all the times. Your boy
David Cunningham
runs through there and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's just a whole bunch of randoms in there. So I think they've recruited like a lot of these kind of fringe mids to come in and see which one works best. So if he gets it, there is definitely a chance of, you know, becoming a half reasonable fantasy scorer. The thing I like about him the most is his tackling numbers. He's such a good tackler, so great junior tackler. And I think even in his first year at Geelong, he put up elite tackling numbers. So that's where he gets a lot of his scoring from. And like I said, if you take away that bad score as an outlier, I know you can't just pick and choose what scores you want to, but one game, if you take that one game out, it's an 64 average, which is an average of 80 BCV. So I don't mind the fog. It's more about just getting a game, I think. And if he gets the game, then I think he's going to be a decent scorer.
But he's going to be one that's going to slide in drafts.
That's true.
You know, no one's really going to keep him unless they're...
Well, now they listen to our podcast. Now he's
So Harry Schoenberg won't be available, nor will Lockie Fogarty. So bad luck.
Depends who I listen to, but
yes. I'm always right. Look, I don't really have an opinion at this stage. I'll be interested to see him. I'm interested to see what Carlton do in their preseason games. You know, who kind of gets a run through where, and maybe get a bit of a look at some of these younger guys like you know, Philp or the other guy that was injured. Anyway, those kind of guys where we haven't seen them before and see if they've got the fantasy pedigree.
All right, let's talk about Mr. Worldwide, Mark Pitney.
Now, I'm not really sure what to make of his 2020. He ended up being the 21st best averaging ruckman of the year, but I actually think he could have and should have delivered more with the opportunity he had.
Just to put that into context, 21's not good. I think there's only like 40-something listed, so yeah mid-range. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's, well, obviously, in most leagues, there'd be 12 teams or 14 teams. You're going to have one ruckman, so he's not your top ruckman. So I think he should have been. He's a proven scorer in the VFL, and I thought he might have nudged a bit better than his 68 average. So, look, he started the year hot. He scored a 74 and a 78, which why do I keep saying equivalates? It's not even a real word, is it?
It's the equivalent of.
Yes, it turned into 92 and 90 BCV. But he really just settled with kind of 60-ish BCV numbers for most of the season now. He did seem to be a bit affected when he played with the King, Tommy DeConing, in tandem, which I think is a bit of a concern going forward because, like yourself, Hef, I'm a bit of a fan of DeConing, and I'm in his camp, and I think they'll kind of let him be the number one ruckman at the side, especially with, you know, Kaz Bolt there to be the second ruck. You've got enough tools around the team in Mackay and McGovern as well if he gets himself fit. So looking at this, and I think you'll talk about DeConing a bit later, I kind of want to avoid Carlton rucks this year if you can. If you want to invest in DeConing, I think you have to pull the trigger. Yeah. But as a two ruck handcuff kind of setup, I don't find a lot of value in both of them this year because I think they might affect each other a bit. If you take one, you're taking both of them as well. So it's two less spots you're committing to these guys because you'd be pretty bold to take DeConing and no one else. Plus, I don't think you're going to get either of them cheap, which is going to be the issue. Yeah, as well. Because people are going to be hot on DeConing and want to take him earlier than he should be. Yeah. And Pitney's got the kind of history that people will take him earlier because he's a bit of a safer option, I think. Yeah, definitely. All right, we'll move on from there. But yeah, there's some things to think about in the Carlton ruck department, I guess. Let's talk about Sam Petrefsky-Seaton. So he averaged 54 points last season. So a few years ago, we thought this guy was going to be a dominant force across halfback, but it hasn't happened. I guess with Doherty returning last year, and then Cade Simpson just kept lingering on. It's really stunted his development. So Simpson retired, so that's positive signs, but Nick Newman's going to return, and then Side comes into the side as well. So I'm not even sure if he's going to slot into that defence. I guess the positive was that his end to 2020, despite only averaging 54 1.1 for the season, he averaged 75.5 from his last three games. So that's a 94 BCV. So the uptick in scoring seemed to be linked to the fact that he played back in defence a bit more in the later stages of the seasons than up to the wing like he did in the middle stages. So with all that said, I'm probably thinking about steering clear of him just because I'm not sure whether he gets that defender spot if he does push up to wing, because he is pretty handy. Can play forward as well. But yeah, look, you've got Doherty side, you've got Newman, because you'd assume Williams plays midfield, but there's another just threat there just in case. Yeah. So I don't know where the improvement comes from, especially with those guys all competing for points. That said, he is a talent, and he's going to be in a lot of draft pools, I think, this year because he will drop back. But I'm just a bit wary on where he's going to play and how he's going to score. He just needed to stamp his authority last year, and he didn't really do that. So I'm a bit concerned, just not of his ability. I just think maybe he needs to move on from Carlton because there's a few guys who play that role, and he might not get it. That's you're looking at some of those guys you mentioned before. So, I've kind of eased on my keenness for SPS, I think.
All right. Let's move on to one of your actual boys, I reckon.
I don't know if he's
I've hit the your boy button. Now he has to be.
David Cunningham's my boy. Look, he was a genuine tease last year. I drafted him into my side quite late. But, geez, after his 28-touch, 124 BCV game against the Dons, I thought I was onto an absolute winner. He dominated that game. He was clearly best on. And I thought, I have found one here. Then he had a lean shot and got injured. So, look, he had a couple of BCV 70s in that time, but then obviously teased us again in the last game of the season against the Lions. He had a BCV 105. So, look, I think he's got the goods, but look, I just don't see where the consistent points come from. You're talking about Williams arriving, Newman coming back in, that kind of pushing people up the ground.
Could he find himself on the outer?
I think he's best 22, but I just think he's going to be a bit of a bit player. I still think that him and, from my point of view, the guys we talked about earlier, I think Gibbons and Cunningham are the two better players of that crew at this stage. But once again, they've got so many of these half forward wingmen that you just can't bank on him, holding that spot for the whole year.
Yeah.
They might make him just play as a small forward, that kind of thing, which isn't really his game. He's actually quite a handy midfielder. Look, he's got forward status again, so you probably don't lose a lot drafting him. He's definitely not a keeper at this stage, unless you're going really deep, but maybe mid draft, I don't know, because you know what he can do in his good days. It's just, do you believe that he can get opportunity? And as I said, I'm quite cold on Carlton players this year.
Because if Schoenberg's making your keepers, I thought he would be a shoo-in. But anyway,
Schoenberg is basically like the next, I don't know, Adam Treloar.
Oh, okay, that's a big call. I can't wait for that one to eventuate. Looking forward to it. Let's move on to the king, Tom De Koning. Look, I really loved the look of this guy last year. Played 7 games, only averaged 52, but look, nothing groundbreaking. Top score was 67, which was an 83 BCV, and this came on the back of 19 hitouts against Callum Sinclair when they played Sydney. So that was his best performance. But it was more the way he went about it. He was clean with the footy, athletic, showed he can hold his own as well, like winning those hitouts against some established ruckmen as well. I just felt like Carlton wanted to roll with one ruck last year. It's just both rucks were quite green, so they had to kind of play them in tandem to kind of work together to see who's going to be the number one, I guess, going forward. So he showed he can ruck solo when Pitney was injured, though, and I do think De Koning is the future number one Carlton ruck. So if you need a ruck, I reckon you grab him. But like we said before with Pitney, you're going to have to grab both of them and handcuff them. But he should be available with De Koning because I don't think many people saw him playing last year. So if he's available, he's definitely one I would grab.
Agreed.
All right.
And a couple of monitors just to finish off. We've got Tom Williamson and Zach Fisher. Both, have had their glimpses. Williamson's been injured a lot, so we haven't really seen the best of him. Highly touted around the Blues. Yeah. And Zach Fisher had probably a couple of good games a few years ago, and people are still holding on to that hope that he can regain that kind of form. But as we've touched on, look, it's that position at Carlton's too hard.
Williams, I don't mind because I reckon he just plays a fantasy role when he is playing. But again, you're really struggling with all those kind of. There's so many of his type in Carlton side, so that's where you're struggling. Fisher is just not going to get that wing roll back, so he's stuck up forward. He's just it's so disappointing because he showed so much, but it's just the ins are just going to kill him, I think. So not a big fan of Fisher at the moment, anyway.
Jeez, all these ins, Carlton better be good this year, otherwise,
there's so many ins, but they're not that good.
Sargent and Williams are pretty handy ins.
Oh, true, but with the rest of them, I guess as well. I don't know. They're still just not going to be that good.
They've got to do something this year.
Yeah, they do.
They've got to do something this year.
Different. All right, that wraps up Carlton, and I guess we'll move on to some membership stuff as well. So if you really like the work that we do and you want to help support the podcast and contribute to putting stuff like this on each week, you could consider becoming a member. And if you do sign up as a member, you get rewarded with a whole heap of bonus resources. So, for example, we've got the draftee numbers and, from all the NAB League, from the Sample Under-18s, the Waffle Colts from last year, or from 2 years ago, because there was none of this playing. Let me rephrase that. NAB League from 2 years ago, Sample and Waffle Colts from last year, because they did actually play. So you can get a gauge of who the best fantasy scorers are at underage level. And there's an announcement in the off-season that there's going to be no prospectus this year. So that was a big go-to for many of our listeners to find all the underage scores. I still flick through them all the time to go back. I've got one sitting on the floor over there next to case. I was using today to go through and, just find out what they scored as juniors and stuff like that. That's gone, all right? So there's not many places you can find these draftee numbers. So they're on our website if you're keen to grab them. Sign up as a member. I've also got an archive. I'm starting an archive anyway, and I've got 2019s up there as well. So you can go back and have a look from a couple of years because some of those guys have will be coming into third year breakout territory. So you want to be looking at them. But the biggest news, I think, in the membership circle is the Breakout Tracker launched this week.
Huge.
It's so the Breakout Tracker, if you're not sure what that is, that allows you to compare any early career player with the top players in the competition at the same point in their careers. I did a live stream last night, which is on all of our socials. So I went through some of the best players on that. We also did a podcast on that last week with some of the findings in that. So that's a really handy option just to kind of see, especially players that you haven't seen a lot of, only played 3, 4, 5 games, how they compare to others at the same point in their careers. And a lot of them will surprise you as well, how well they score in their first few games. Players like Damon Greaves, who only played 3 games last year, is absolutely rocketing ahead of the best. And it's pretty obvious with the way he scored, but it's just interesting to see.
Yeah.
New features on it this year for the people that are returning as well. We've got a filter on there, so you can filter by club and by position. And I guess it's just a different display as well, which makes it a bit more user-friendly as well. So a few upgrades, and thanks to Adam for helping us out with the coding side of things on the back of that JavaScript little app there. Anyway, every week we read out 5 gold members, people that have put in their hard-earned to support the podcast, and they're absolute legends. And this is actually the first 5 people to sign up for
the cream of the crop.
So these would be super fans, I guess. Fans is the least word.
All those names look pretty familiar.
Yeah, I've definitely come along across a lot of them. One of them we used to play footy with, but the rest are on the socials very, very actively. So thank you to Simon Moore. Special mention to Simon, who shipped a few beers across the border from WA for me last week. Enjoyed them down at the beach last week, so thank you, Simon, for that. Dale Travers, one of our old footy mates, but loves the pod. Dylan Brooks, Steve Greenwood, and Henry McIntosh. Again, like I said, familiar names that we're always chatting away with on the socials, but thank you for signing up and supporting the podcast.
Big time.
Just before we move on to the podcast reviews, I just want to give the merch plug. So we've got t-shirts available. Just head to our website, hit merch if you can, and use the coupon code 20T, so it's 20TEE, and you'll get yourself a t-shirt for $20. So pretty good deal there, I think. And now, podcast reviews.
Wow,
we've
got one.
We actually had a few in the off season, and I want to make mention of the username he's left here, because this was obviously in the off season before Ben Keays became our favorite, my favorite person in the world.
He's been lots of people's favorite for a year, you dick.
Well, obviously here, according to this guy's username, he's not his favorite. So there's a few out there.
This is
but anyway,
blasphemous.
his username is no keys, please. Anyway, I'm going to say yes, please, Keys from now on.
Yes.
But anyway, he wrote, Top Keeper Pod, fantastic podcast, very informative and engaging to listen to. Great work this year, boys. Won my first grand final tonight, and the waiver suggestions were a big part of that. Wondering about your thoughts for the final keeper spot. We keep 16. Can only keep one out of Harry Schoenberg, Will Gould, or Devon Robinson. Any help with that would be much appreciated. So before we answer this, that's very smart. People put their questions in the podcast reviews so they get read out earlier.
Guaranteed listen.
We're
guaranteed read.
We're more than happy with that, because it gets us a podcast review as long as you give it 5 stars.
Yes.
More than happy with that. But guys, Harry Schoenberg, Will Gould, or Devon Robinson?
Why are you asking me that question?
Because I know you're going to say Harry Schoenberg.
Well, press the My Boy button.
All right, let me press it. There we go.
Harry Schoenberg.
I would personally go with Will Gould, but
the guy that's not best 22 at his side.
Yeah, will be this year. He's one of the most selected players in Fantasy Classic. So
who cares?
Yeah, well,
different format. That means keeper league.
Well, that means he's going to play. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe.
Well, a lot of people think he will.
Until it's come out the horse's mouth, I'm not listening to it.
The literal horse's mouth.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the listener questions. Okay, moving on to the listener questions. Each week we take questions from our listeners off the social media channels and read them out on the podcast. Now, before we start this, if you're still watching this live and you've got some questions you want to be, answered on the show, chuck them in the comments now. We'll get to a few that have been put out there towards the end. But get them in now, because we don't want to be reading them out or waiting around for them to come in. Anyway, Mason Davey, he's asking, curious to know your thoughts on what the impact will be to players with a reduction in interchange rotations from 90 to 75. Mason Davies a gold member as well. I'll answer this one, Case, because I've already written some notes here. So there's a lot of people talking about the guys with the bigger tanks could benefit, and more players will be resting on field. My gut feel is it's probably just not going to change much to actually even be noticeable. We've had rotations before. We had unlimited down to 100, then 100 down to 90. Now we're going from 90 to 75. I don't remember any standouts there, and anything changed really anything. Maybe 3 or 4 points a game, because if you look at their points per minute numbers, they don't spend that whole time, the extra minutes on the ground at all. Like, there's still rotations and things like that. So look at those points per minute numbers, but I just don't think that it usually has that much effect. I could be completely wrong. 75 might be the magic number, but for just going on history, it hasn't really changed much. So yeah, it's more about looking at the points per minutes and making sure they don't fluctuate too much, but I don't think they do. So yeah, we'll go from there.
I don't think so either. At Trav014.
Another gold member.
Narkle, after being in limbo with contract negotiations, do you think he'll be about to prove a point? He can be a very fantasy-friendly player, but obviously the Cats have a stacked midfield.
Yeah, really not sure on Narkle. Like, you'd hope so. He does have a big year, being a contract year, and all that kerfuffle that happened there. But I think he might have also just conceded that he's just not going to get a game for Geelong at the same time. That midfield is pretty stacked. It depends if they can find another role for him. But
it's tough when people like Higgins keep coming in.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got, so many other good players. Duncan, Dangerfield, Parfitt,
I reckon you just hope he gets traded. I reckon at the end of the year, moves off to another club and goes and shows you the potential he can have, because he's had some big games, especially at the end of 2019. At a big end of 2019 and looked like he was going to go big last year, but just couldn't. I think he got injured last year and then he couldn't break in after that or something like that. But anyway, move on to the next question. So at Sav Briggers, who would you keep out of Rosie and DeGoey in a league where goals are worth 8? Jeez, I'm glad you're asking this one, guys. That makes it tough.
No, it doesn't. I think you can still keep Rosie. DeGoey purely has never really strung a full season together. So for me, I think Rosie's still got plenty of growth. And while he may not end up kicking more snags than DeGoey, I think he can be a pretty consistent goal-kicking midfielder, Rosie. He gets forward. He knows where they are. I love DeGoey, and I think with the +8, it makes him a bit more of a tasty player to take. But I just worry about his body, year in, year out. We haven't really seen him string them together. And I'd be leaning towards Rosie. I think there's a bit more untapped upside with him.
The only thing with Rosie, I'm just worried that he might not be a forward going forward.
Okay.
Forward going forward? Yeah, that sounds weird.
That makes
Whereas
sense.
DeGoey is going to be
locked in forward. Yeah.
Could also be locked up, but we won't go there as well. I just think, that's the only thing I think in terms of just, team balance and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Maybe DeGoey, but I love Rosie, so I'd be keeping Rosie as well. But that's the only spanner in the works I'd actually throw there.
Yeah.
All right, from at WDavo176. If you're starting a new keeper league this year, who do you draft first, Rowell or Walsh? And where do you draft them?
Definitely Ralph.
Second that.
Look, I think he's got untapped potential. Walsh just looks that really steady player, just one you can lock and load each week from now on in. I think, almost be 100 average. But for me, I think Rao is the guy who's just going to go big. Like, he can get you 150s and that kind of thing. And as a captain, he's the guy you want long term. I suppose the issue with Rao in a startup is that someone's going to take him first round, or he should go first round. I don't even know. I think for me, that's probably still a bit too early for a guy who's only played 4 or 5 games. Look, my first rounders, you'd be looking at like a Merritt, a Lloyd, a Grundy, a Matt Crouch, proven guys who know you get 100 pluses each week. And, at that level where they're kind of in the 23 to 26 range, you've got them for the next, 5 or 7 years scoring big points. Look, I think for me, Rao's probably a round 2, maybe early round 3. Whereas I think with Walsh, you might get a bit more value. I think he'd slide to like a round 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
So you can kind of grab like a proven Merit or something like that, and then top up with Walsh a bit later on in the draft, and you're going to be a winner.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. Like, I was actually asked this on the Traders podcast, Clang, name drop. But yeah.
Hollywood have. Can we get that as a screen flash up?
Yeah, Roy was very adamant that you'd be taking those players early, and I just said, you got to score points in the end of the day still. Yeah. So I'd definitely be going the superstars, especially if you're playing captains on as well. But I wouldn't they're the type of players I'd take in my second or third round if they slid that far.
Yeah.
I did that in our first year. I made sure I took Gary Ablett round 1, and then I think I'll revisit this. It's a shocker. Oh no, I took Dyson Heppel with my second pick. So he was a 19-year-old at that stage and playing in defence. So I thought getting defender. The third pick I took was Jack Grimes. In fairness, he was pretty,
you ruined his career.
It was pretty good at the time, but and he was real young as well. I think third year, so I thought breakout time. I think he'd already gone 80 the year before.
We'll probably touch on We'll probably touch on drafting a new keeper league.
Yes, there will be content on that later on when AFL Fantasy Classic fully opens up for keeper leagues. That's about the time we'll be doing a bit of stuff then. Yeah. So stay tuned for that. All right.
At Dan K101, what are your thoughts on Mitch Georgiades and Finn Mcguinness as long-term keeper prospects?
Look, I love Mitch as a player. player, and I'm confident that he'll one day be like a starting 18 type keeper. Not your best forward or anything like that, but one that you'll play each week. But the thing is, he may have to play tall throughout his career, but I think his athletic attributes will make him a good fantasy scorer. He'll have up and down weeks like everyone, but he's got that flair that he'll go big every now and then. I rate Finn Mcguinness also. He played one game and only scored 39 points, but the positive on that, 70 of his 10 touches in that game were contested, and he was playing on Marcus Bontempelli as well. So it was like they just said, here, have a go at this, see how you go against Marcus Bontempelli, and he wasn't terrible. So he's got good pedigree. He was a decent junior scorer to be averaging in the 80s, I think, in both the NAB League and Under-18 Championship. I think they're both good long-term prospects. Makes it a tough case to keep them unless you're playing dynasty style and you can lock them away. But I think long-term, they'll both be good prospects, I reckon.
Definitely agree. I'm a big fan of Georgiadis. I reckon he's got something about him as a really, really good fantasy scoring forward option long term. Yeah.
We've got a few on the comments here across the different socials here, so I'll read them out. So Taylor Q, another gold member, a new gold member, so welcome to the club, Taylor. Will Tim English improve, plateau, or drop off with Steph Martin?
We touched on this in, members only pod the other day. I'm super keen on Tim English. I think we've got some stats that he actually doesn't win that many points from hitouts. Yep. So if he's not number one ruck and Steph Martin has a lot of time in the midfield, he's a really good floater around the ground. Will probably do a lot of the backline ruckman work. He takes intercept marks. He's really good below his feet.
Can I just rebut? Like if he's not in the ruck, he's not floating around. He's going to be locked to a position.
My point is Steph Martin will take the centre hit out and then float forward, whereas Tim English will ruck all the way around the ground. He may not be your starting in your guts, but Tim English is that mobile. Steph Martin is like 32 and not very mobile. He's going to go up forward. Dogs have their own woes up forward in terms of goal kicking options. Bruce didn't do much.
Not now. They've got Jamaro Ugle-Hagan.
Yeah, not as a key forward. I think he's going to come on and go. I think. Look, I'm not worried at all. I'm an English owner and I'm not worried at all.
I think he'll plateau because I don't think having a second ruck helps him at all. Definitely can't help you.
Well, he wins like 15 points from hitouts each week.
But I think I agree with you. His scoring comes from playing around the ground, but that's when he was playing like really high level ruck time. Now he's going to be swapping forward.
He's going to float across the halfback line, take a heap of intercept marks.
I wouldn't be surprised if he goes backwards, but long term, it's not going to hurt him.
No.
So I think long term he's going to be good. Yeah. But it's just this year.
Don't get cold feet, English owners.
Just this year, you got to hold on to him and accept if he does plateau, even drop off a tiny bit. I can't see him going hugely down.
No.
I just can't see him skyrocketing with him in there. So you're going to have to hold off for another year and go from there. A really important question. Cherry Plum rating out of 5. What do you reckon? This is from Dylan on Twitter.
3.5?
3.5? Yeah, I reckon 3.5. 4 for me. I'm an easy critic.
I'm a staunch ginger lemon guy. So
there's none in the shipment either.
Yeah, no. I saw that picture and I was like, what the fuck, man?
Well, I actually put the order in. I didn't put it in there. Sorry, man. Well, I wanted to try.
Who needs enemies when you got friends like Hef?
Well, I wanted to try a few new ones. So we got wild berry,
try a few.
cherry plum. So we got a few new ones in there. So
look,
it's all right.
I'm kind of only at 1 or 2 remedy a week, so I'm fine.
I'm a slab a day.
Yeah, it's a proper addiction.
I'm a kombucha-holic. All right. Last question of the night comes from Mason Davey, another gold member. So Tom Phillips, 2020 BCV, down on prior years. New team, same role. Is he back to the 2021 average of 90 plus? I think so.
I think so too. Yeah. Hawthorn is still pretty weak. He's going to get a lot of opportunity, a lot of responsibility through that kind of wing midfield role.
Yeah.
I think he's one that could easily bounce back to some good scores.
Yep, I agree. Just going back to, he was a Hawthorn supporter as a kid as well, so a bit of pride in the jumper as well.
What a great story.
As well. So great story. I do appreciate that as well. So I think, playing that wing role, which really suits him because he was stuck up forward for a lot last year. So he'll actually get back to his roots and I think he'll put up some good numbers. All right, Kays, that wraps it up for another week. So get on our socials, Keeper League Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Really hit up that Instagram. We've got no followers on that one because we're actually putting stuff out on it now, which is good. So get on board that, give us a follow there and give us a helping hand. It's actually a good tool to reach AFL players, I've noticed. So, if we can actually get a following and look like we're not nobodies on that, that'd be great.
That would be nice.
When we tweet them and send them private messages, they don't think we're just weirdos. So, that'd be good. Anything else to add? I guess T-shirts, membership, if you want to keen to jump on.
T-shirts, memberships, it's all starting to heat up now. It's I'm starting to get really excited doing this research.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm pumped for this season.
We're going to try to do these streams every week, at least for the off-season. I don't know how much work it's going to be to do, whether it's sustainable with a full-time job. But luckily, I've got...
Off-season streams, let's roll with that.
Let's roll with that, and we might go forward after that. But anyway. All right, thanks for joining us, listeners. We'll be back again next week. Hope you enjoy the pod. All the team analysis Analysis articles will be out on the website, keeperleaguepod.com.au this week, plus some other bits and pieces around the place as well. So get excited for that. And we'll talk to you soon.
See you guys.